It's great to catch up with the member for Riverina, Michael McCormack. How are you, Michael?
Very well, thank you, Ricky.
There's been a lot going on. We've got our first fortnight of sitting in federal parliament. Just what's the feeling you're getting with the new parliament?
Well, it's different being in opposition, but I have been in opposition before. I was in, of course, the opposition in 2010 to 2013, the Julia Gillard, Kevin Rudd years. And look, you can still get a lot done in opposition. You can still make sure that the government's being held to account, obviously advocating for the region, the people who send you to Canberra to do the job for it on their behalf, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And I've just come from a very important foreign affairs and trade meeting with members from all sides of Parliament. It was a good bipartisan meeting, and we all agreed to work together in the nation's best interests. And I think there's a lot of that goes on behind the scenes. I know that people see the argy-bargy and the bitter acrimony that sometimes goes on in question time. But look, that's not what Parliament is always all about. It is about getting things done, and I think people from both sides and the crossbench do try to work and endeavour to do just that.
Now, I noticed that National Party leader David Littleproud commented on Peter Dutton and the coalition endorsing having a national conversation about nuclear. Is that one of those scenarios where nuclear energy could be advanced in a bipartisan way?
Well, of course, that will be up to the government, that will be up to Labor, but if we're going to get to net zero emissions by 2050, as is the plan, then nuclear has to be part of that. Indeed, it has to be part of the national conversation. So let's have that discussion. I mean, if people have a mass building up within their body and it needs to have nuclear medicine to get rid of it, they're rushing to the medical facility door to get that happening. But of course, if you talk about nuclear energy, they run a million miles in the other direction, and that's been the difficulty with nuclear energy. We've got the uranium, we've got the resource that can provide it, but we don't have the I suppose the willingness by society at the moment, the Australian community, to get on with it. And I don't know how many people have approached me in recent years to say we need to have nuclear as part of our energy mix, but let's have the conversation. We're not saying it necessarily will happen. All we're saying is let's have the conversation to see where we can land.
Well, we're one of only, I think, there's only a couple of G20 nations that don't rely on nuclear energy, and the only other one is going to implement it. So it seems to me we seem to be a pariah, in a sense, in using nuclear energy like a lot of other countries are.
It is, you're right, and that's why we're saying, all we're saying is let's have the conversation. Let's have an open, sensible conversation to see where we can take this.
Now, you mentioned foreign affairs and trade. Naturally, our farmers understand how important trade is for our export-oriented farmed markets. When it comes to foot and mouth disease, we are FMD free, and there's not a majority of countries in the world that have that. It's so important to keep that status and to work to make sure the country keeps it out.
We've been foot and mouth disease free for 130 years. The risk is it's been detected in, albeit minimal traces, in both Adelaide and Melbourne in recent weeks. We had that person bring a McDonald's burger in, contrary to the rules, landed in Darwin the other day and got a substantial fine, as that person should have. We need to keep this out and use every available measure to do so. We get foot and mouth in this country, and it places at risk our $80 billion agriculture sector. We get foot and mouth disease, we might as well just shut up every abattoirs, because it will be rife, and so we need to do everything we can. That's why we've called on the government to act, and act immediately. I have to say, they tell us that everything is being done, but that rollout of the disinfectant foot baths at airports and other measures, I felt and we felt was a little tardy. But let's give the government the benefit of the doubt. Murray Watt, the Agriculture Minister, says he understands the problem, and we'll work with the government to do everything we can to ensure that we don't get FMD in this country.
Now, bringing the focus a bit closer to the electorate of Riverina, first of all, just talking about the Building Better Regions Fund. It's been something that's been well used by the Coalition to make sure regional Australia gets its fair share of federal funding. Have there been projects in your electorate that have benefited from that fund?
Oh, absolutely. You only have to look at the Main Street upgrades right across the electorate. And I know not just the Building Better Regions Fund, but indeed the local roads and community infrastructure funding that Lockhart Shire has benefited from. And you see the streetscapes that have been upgraded, the Lockhart Football and Netball Club, it received funding for its clubhouse, for its kitchen facility there, and it's probably, some would argue, second to none in the Hume League as far as that amenity is concerned.
Transport and Infrastructure Minister Catherine King mentioned the audit report that came out last Thursday about the Building Better Regions Fund and talked about these other factors that were used to determine whether projects receive funding. Is it of concern that she's now paused round 6 of the Building Better Regions Fund due to those concerns?
Oh, it's a huge concern. As I've just said, I really hope that Labor doesn't use this as a lever to stop regional funding, because when you look at what we were able to do, we were able to provide the support that communities so desperately needed. And just don't take my word for it, you ask any mayor, including Greg Verdon in Lockhart Shire, but any mayor across not just the Riverina and Central West, but indeed right across the country, and ask them about the regional funding that we invested. And at the end of the day, not one project was not recommended by the department. They were all recommended. Yes, some were scored higher than others, but it's the local members who know what project best suits their local area. It shouldn't be up to a Canberra bureaucrat to decide where the funding's going to go. Otherwise, why have elections? Why have elected representatives going to Canberra if you're not going to utilise their input into the decision-making process? And at the end of the day, the minister has that final say. I always put in place a ministerial council around any decisions I made to ensure that there was fairness and equity around these decisions. I'm proud of what I was able to do as the minister, as the Deputy Prime Minister, and I stand by all the decisions I took. And, we want to make sure that we build community capacity in these regional areas. I mean, that's what the regional funding is for. I certainly do hope that Labor doesn't strip it away under some guise of, well, we need to pay down the debt. And I know there's been a bit of talk this week about the fact that what have you got to show for the money that you've spent during the COVID? Well, 40,000 lives were saved. But, we look at the community funding that we've been able to provide. I mean, that Lockhart Renewable Energy Project, $1 million to get Lockhart off the grid. I mean, what a forward-thinking project that is. And, not just that, but, schools have benefited, the Rocken District Meals on Wheels, so many good little organisations, Valmar Support Services, which provide such good community support for those who, are vulnerable in the community. I talk about Lockhart Show. I know it's been cancelled the past 2 years. We're getting back into show season now and in the full swing of things. We've provided money as a coalition government to these shows right across the community. Lockhart included $82,000 it received to build infrastructure, and I urge and encourage people, when the Lockhart Show is back on, as well as all the other local agricultural shows, get along to one of them.
Well, Michael McCormack, member for Riverina, thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you a bit closer to that Lockhart Show you mentioned. Thanks again.
We'll do it. Thanks, Ricky. All the best.